Let's dive right in. Imagine standing in the heart of Rome today, looking up at the massive, weather-beaten walls of the Colosseum. It is an absolute marvel of ancient engineering, standing almost 17 stories high. But one of the first things you'll notice if you really look closely are these thousands of jagged, mysterious holes covering the stone. They almost look like scars from an ancient battle, speckling nearly every single block on the exterior. Now, for a long time, visitors just assumed these were bullet holes from old wars, or maybe just signs of natural decay. And honestly, it's super easy to write them off as the inevitable wear and tear of a building that has stood for nearly 2,000 years. But the forensic reality? It's actually far more impressive, and it tells a story of survival that goes way beyond mere weathering. Get this. These holes are actually the only remaining clues to a secret super metal skeleton that once held this 50,000-ton masterpiece together. To really grasp how radical this is, you have to realize the Colosseum was built in just 8 years, starting around 72 AD. And the way these engineers constructed it was totally unconventional. So here's what they did. When the Romans built the outer walls of the Flavian amphitheater, they did something that seems almost impossible today. They didn't use a single drop of cement or mortar between those massive travertine blocks. Seriously, not one drop. These blocks were quarried 20 miles away, dragged all the way to the site, and then just stacked entirely dry. Instead of mortar, they relied on a system of pure geometry and hidden iron to literally stitch the building together from the inside out. They used this brilliant 3-step ancient process. First, workers would carve these deep sockets and channels directly into the travertine blocks. Then they'd insert heavy iron wads. And finally, they'd pour in molten lead to seal them in place forever. The lead basically acted as this perfect, watertight seal around the metal. The sheer scale of their ambition here is just staggering. The architects used over 300 tons of these iron clamps to secure the stones. Think about that for a second. 300 tons of precious, high-quality metal hidden entirely from view, forming this invisible internal net that locked every single block to its neighbor. Now, you might be wondering, why go through all that trouble instead of just using cement? I mean, the Romans were absolute masters of concrete. Well, the answer is seismic resistance. Because the blocks weren't rigidly glued together, that iron skeleton allowed the building to breathe and actually flex slightly during the frequent earthquakes that rocked Italy. This metal frame acted like a giant shock absorber, distributing that massive weight across the arches and keeping the stones from sliding out of alignment. But as we move into the Middle Ages, the story takes a pretty dark turn. After the fall of the Empire, the Colosseum was no longer a state-protected monument. It essentially became the city's favorite totally free hardware store. The great gladiatorial games had stopped in the 5th century, and the amphitheater was just left to decay. Over time, it basically morphed into a medieval apartment complex, with citizens building houses, stables, and workshops right there inside the arches. And as people were living within its walls, they realized something big. There were hundreds of tons of high-quality iron hidden right inside the stone. And hey, that was way easier to steal than mining new ore. So medieval scavengers started hacking into the stone with chisels and these long drills specifically to pry out those iron clamps. It was a massive, dangerous undertaking for sure, but that iron was incredibly valuable to the medieval economy. This means every single hole you see on the exterior today is the exact spot where a metal hunter dug out a piece of the building's spine just to melt it down into tools, knives, or horseshoes. Imagine the sheer noise and the physical effort over generations, just chipping away at those perfect travertine blocks to extract a single iron rod. The earthquake of 1349 and the geological smoking gun. By the time these scavengers were finished, the Colosseum had completely lost its internal structural integrity. That hidden skeleton that had protected it for centuries was entirely gone. This made the building incredibly vulnerable when a massive earthquake finally hit in 1349. And here is the forensic smoking gun. Before the Colosseum was even built, the site was an artificial lake created by Emperor Nero. When they drained it for construction, the foundation ended up resting on 2 entirely different surfaces. The foundations hit solid bedrock on the north side, but rested on soft, waterlogged lake sediment on the south. So without its metal skeleton, that southern wall simply couldn't hold itself together. During the quake, the ground under the southern side essentially turned to liquid. The result? The entire southern outer ring collapsed into a colossal pile of rubble. And you guessed it, that rubble didn't just stay there. it became a free stone quarry. The ruins were carted away by contractors to build Renaissance Rome. We're talking palaces, churches, and even parts of bridges built using the fallen stones of the Colosseum, leaving us with the asymmetrical, broken silhouette we recognize today. It's just mind-blowing to think that the very thing that made the Colosseum eternal was also exactly what made it a target for the people who eventually tore it apart. Later on, the popes did step in to protect the remaining northern wall since it sat on the processional route to the Vatican, but the structural damage to the south was already done. It's the ultimate irony, really. The genius iron engineering meant to save it from earthquakes is exactly what lured the scavengers who doomed half the structure. So, if you could go back in time, would you rather see the arena in its original shimmering white glory? Or do you think the scars it wears today tell a more interesting story of survival? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And hey, if you want to keep uncovering the technical secrets the ancient world left behind, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next explainer. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.